Good afternoon. I'd like to call the February 16th Board of Adjustment meeting to order. Hearings before the Board of Adjustment are quasi-judicial in nature. Decisions of the board are based on a record of these proceedings. To grant a variance requires a concurrent vote of 4/5 of the members of the board. To reverse or modify the determination of an administrative official requires a simple majority. Evidence submitted to the board for review becomes part of the record. Appeals for the board decisions are to Superior Court and are based on the record. Appeals must be filed within 30 days of the date of the filing of the board's order in the Planning Division. A hearing before the board is conducted in accordance with its rules of procedure. Those who want to testify in a case are sworn as witnesses. The chairperson recognizes those who want to testify or their attorneys for presentation of evidence during the hearing. To ensure that all testimony is properly recorded, please come forward to address the board, state your name and address, and speak clearly. Thank you. You want to swear everybody in?
All right, I'll ask that staff, applicants, and members of the public wishing to speak will stand up and raise their right hand. Everybody? Okay. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you. First item of business is approval of the minutes from January 19th. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Thank you. The first order of business we're going to move to is item 2, which is 301 Toulon Drive. The applicant is requested to continue this item to the March 16th, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to move item number 2 to the March 16th, 2023 meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. First item before the board today, item 1 is 108 South 2nd Street.
Of the board, the applicant has requested to continue this item to the April meeting, and that is going to be on April the 20th. Staff believes that we will be able to work with the applicant to solve this problem such that a variance will not be necessary, but we will update you at that meeting, and hopefully the applicant will be able to request a withdrawal at that meeting.
Thank you. We have a motion to continue item 1, 108 South 2nd Street to the April 20th meeting. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. So now the first item before the Board of Adjustment is item number 3, 460 South College Road.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. On January 3rd, 2023, planning staff accepted an application for a variance to landscaping requirements in the Regional Business District pursuant to City Code Chapter 18, Land Development Code Section 18, 319, 321, and 326. The subject property contains an existing retail store, Rooms to Go, which is proposing a complete renovation of the building and parking area. As part of the proposed redevelopment, Rooms to Go plans to install 26 new parking spaces in the rear and reconfigure the front parking lot to include 44 spaces, a total of 70 spaces. This would be an increase from the existing 46 spaces on site currently. Land Development Code Section 18-326 requires streetscape landscaping and parking lot landscaping at a ratio of 3/4 the requirement of new construction. Land Development Code Section 18-319 requires a minimum of 1 canopy tree, 6 understory trees, and 9 shrubs per 100 linear feet of street frontage for new construction, and the applicant's proposal requires 3/4 this requirement. In this instance, a total of 4 canopy trees, 19 understory trees, and 29 shrubs along Randall Parkway, and 2 canopy trees, 9 understory trees, and 14 shrubs along South College Road. The applicant has requested a variance to Land Development Code Section 18-319 to allow for 0 canopy trees, 2 understory trees, and 33 shrubs along South College Road frontage, a variance of 2 canopy trees, 7 understory trees. The applicant has also requested a variance to Land Development Code Section 18-319 to allow for 4 canopy trees, 3 understory trees, and 18 shrubs along Randall Parkway frontage. This is a variance of 16 understory trees and 11 shrubs. The applicant states the site has been subject to right-of-way takings by North Carolina Department of Transportation and the City of Wilmington along both South College Road and Randall Parkway, leaving the property line directly against the parking area, and allowed the installation of utilities close to the edge of the parking area along South College Road. The Randall Parkway improvements extended from Independence Boulevard to South College Road and was approved in 2010. The applicant further states that they are proposing to plant 22 grasses and 250 perennials along the South College Road frontage, as well as 45 grasses and 403 perennials along Randall Parkway. Land Development Code Section 18321 requires landscaping islands, medians, or peninsulas at a rate of 1 per 12 parking spaces pursuant to City Code Chapter 18, Land Development Code Section 18326. The applicant's proposal would require 3/4 this amount of parking lot landscaping, and each island, median, or peninsula shall be planted with at least 1 canopy tree and vegetative ground cover. The applicant has requested to plant a mixture of canopy trees and understory trees within the required islands, medians, or peninsulas. And the applicant further states that they are proposing to revegetate the site using native plants that honor the coastal ecology. This matter is set for hearing today, February 16th, 2023. This case is subject to the 4 findings of fact, which I have placed on the screen in front of you, and I ask that this presentation and all materials be submitted into the record. I'm available for any questions, and the applicant and their agent is here as well.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Schaefer with Lee Case. I'm here on behalf of the property owner and the applicant. With me this afternoon are Will Martin from Rooms to Go, as well as Dan Danvers from Bowler. Dan is going to be the one speaking to you for most of today, but we did want to share with you some presentations to kind of help you understand what we're dealing with at the site, because it's a little hard for me to understand what we're asking for without the visuals that Dan was able to put together for us. So we're really hoping that this can help you all as well. So again, here's the site. It's the Rooms to Go building. I want to be very clear from the start. We are not asking to add impervious surface. In fact, we're reducing the impervious surface. The reason that we're coming before you for a variance is because we want to update the facade of the building. That doesn't trigger the variance, but we also want to update the parking lots. And because we're restriping and modifying the parking lots, we're adding parking spaces, no impervious surface, and so that triggers the variance request. That would require us to do the streetscape and landscaping and bring it up to, as Miranda said, part of the code. However, this site is very particular in the way that it is oriented and the utilities. As you can see, we're right up against that utility pole there. These are some existing site conditions. It needs fixed up, right? So we're going to be removing all of this broken pavement and including landscaping in this area as well. So again, I think we've been through the history of the property and the takings, but so I won't spend too much time on this one. Did kind of want to show you, again, some of the utilities that bisect our property. They're coming right through the parking lot. Again, as you can see, the trees that are already on site are already interfering with the electric wires that are there. So adding additional trees is just going to further conflict with the existing utilities that are on our site. What does this mean? So again, I want to be very clear, we're abandoning pavement. We are decreasing pavement. We can't find a site plan that shows parking spots allocated to the rear of the property, but every aerial you'll see, there are cars back there. So it was hard to quantify the amount of parking spaces that we had back there because of that. But again, as you'll see in every aerial, there are trucks and cars parked back there. This is the site plan if it were to comply with the code, and this is where I'm going to turn it over to Dan because I don't want to misspeak on any of his excellent work that he's done. So if Dan can come up, and I'll just ask him to state his name and his qualifications.
Good Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dan Danvers. I'm a registered landscape architect in the state of North Carolina, Maine, and Tennessee. Happy to be here today to present this to you. Thank you, Amy and Miranda, for running through this. Covered a lot of ground so far. I'll move through this pretty quickly. As Amy stated, in front of you right now is a code-compliant landscape plan to the letter of the rule. Highlighted in red are vegetation, largely trees and understory trees, that are burdened by utilities that are on site. If I can back up, let me see. If you'll note the highlighted areas, you can see the significant presence of utilities very close to the property line along both Randall and South College Road. So these trees, by and large, would have either a very short lifespan or the applicant would run into significant construction restrictions when we go to plant these trees. So that's the basis of the variance that we're in front of you presenting today. In front of you now is a rendered plan that shows a landscape plan that complies with the variance that we're requesting. You'll notice that, oh, I can point, sweet. These areas here are left pretty wide open to accommodate the utilities, as well as us moving to more of a ground cover, grasses, perennials, and shrubs along College Avenue, which are plants that are more suitable for being within close proximity of overhead power lines and underground utilities. This is a graphic plant palette describing some of the vegetation that we're proposing on site here. Largely our material is native. It's kind of a goal of mine and something that I think benefits the local community. As an example, especially on a corner lot, of how to use native materials in an artful way. Again, continuing with that, you'll see that our grasses are not just, fescue grass, turf. These are tall plants that have mass to them and have visual characteristics that are appealing to the eye, as well as perennials that flower, and then wide swaths of ground cover to the bottom right, which is a perennial mix consisting of largely native plants in the area. We've prepared some graphic visualizations of what this plan would look like. We've illustrated the right-of-way area as an open green. This will vary over time, as I believe Wilmington, along with the applicant, are partnering to improve some of this area with a sidewalk. So that'll change over time, but you can see that the parking lot is very well screened. We are compliant with headlight mitigation, some light stuff that is stated in the parking portion of the ordinance. But again, trying to depict our massing, this is not a barren site. We're not asking for this variance to remove visual appeal of the site. We're trying to enhance it in a different way. This is a view from Randall Parkway, just beyond the site. This is an existing curb cut, and this is where the bulk of our repurposed parking is occurring. You can see here that, again, we're trying to build a lot of massing in here to remove kind of the lawn, open, void area. We're screening all of our equipment, which is on this frontage, and improving the building considerably. This is an aerial view. Walking by the site, you wouldn't see this view in particular, but what it does a good job of is showing the scale of the parking area and the improvements to the exterior of the building. Again, another aerial view. None of us will be tall enough to see except maybe the linesmen working on the power lines, but this is another view of the front of the facade. This is more of a pedestrian scale view. This would be more the user experience at the intersection of Randall Parkway and South College Road. You can see, looking into the site, that the shrub line that we're proposing at installation will be high enough to block the lights from vehicles as they park pointing at the road. You'll see a nice massing of native plant materials and native yet ornamentally used grasses. And then I'll hand this back to Amy. Thank you.
So again, the variance requirements that Miranda showed, The right-of-way takings from the North Carolina Department of Transportation and the City of Wilmington have just created a lot of utility conflicts on our site. So to meet the standard requirements of the landscape are just almost impossible right now without creating undue burdens on those utilities. That's even if we were able to plant, you know, if Duke and the other power companies would give us that authority to do so. And again, most of these answers are all the same. The conditions that are particular to this property, it's a corner site with the right-of-way takings and the utility locations bisecting our property. You know, had nothing to do with the applicant or the building. It's building's been there for quite some time. We're just trying to update and improve some of the things on the site. And I think it's consistent with the spirit and purpose and intent of the ordinance. We want to beautify the site. We want to add trees to the site. We want to add grasses and landscape islands and all of those things, or we wouldn't be here asking for this variance. It could just stay the way it was. So that is our request before you today. I also would like to submit our application and presentation into the record, and Dan and I are available for any questions. Also, again, Will Martin from Rooms to Go, if you have any particular questions about the site or the project.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant at this time?
I have a few. The 3 large crepe myrtles at the corner, you're cutting those down? I don't see them in your image.
It's a great question. So the 3 crepe myrtles, if I may direct you back to this plan. The 3 crepe myrtles existing are within the right-of-way. They're not impacted by the site. To your point, they weren't modeled in the graphic. It is our understanding, I can't zoom, forgive me. It is my understanding that as City of Wilmington and the applicant propose the sidewalk, and as those improvements are constructed, the grading, the incidental grading and the paving that's affiliated with that will likely impact those trees to their detriment.
So you're saying that
But
the
that's
city's effort or the city's work will result in those coming down?
Correct, as they're within the right-of-way. I believe that will be in coordination with NCDOT as well.
Next question, the large sign, which obviously doesn't fit within the new LDC, and I know there's a period of 10 years. Can you talk about what your plan is for the future sign, given the
We have not been through.
kind of the massive sign you have in place right now, and what that should look like in the future?
I don't know that they have been through sign review. I know that we had a pre-technical review, and fully understanding that all of that would have to be in compliance with the code. Dan was just trying to pull together some visuals for you all with some prototypes that we had, but I'll let Will speak to that a little more. Could you just give it to
Sure. Will Martin, Director of Real Estate for Rooms to Go. To Amy's point, we have not made it quite that far. We're more concerned right now with working with the city, improving the look of the building, improving the existing conditions on site as it relates to landscaping. As I'm sure all of you are familiar with the building in sight, there's not a lot of landscaping there today at all. So this would be a vast improvement, again, from both the landscaping and a building aesthetic standpoint. And then to touch back on the crepe myrtles, it was our understanding from a meeting that we had, a pre-application meeting, that eventually a sidewalk will be brought across in the right-of-way, which of course we have no concerns with. But unfortunately, our current property line stops at our curb line. So all of that green space that you see, the overhead power lines, and the 3 crepe myrtles are actually not even on our property today, which is why, as we add the landscape buffer, we are reducing the impervious, because we're actually adding a landscape buffer which does not exist in its current state.
Thank you. Additional questions?
I just have one for Melissa, talking about the sign, and is considering that if we're going to consider the variance for this, are we allowed to consider compliance for the sign and bringing that into the vision for the current LDC?
No.
Okay.
This request is simply about landscaping.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
I now open up the evidentiary hearing. Is there anyone here to speak and present additional evidence concerning this matter? Seeing no one, we will close the evidentiary hearing and open for board discussion. You know, it is a unique property, and as you go by there and walk the corner, everything's pretty tight. And the crepe myrtles that are there were a concern, but they're not really on Rooms to Go's property. And canopy trees are going to continue to interfere with the power lines, which makes that kind of a short-term solution. I do think they've gone a little bit over and above what they need to. So I'm really okay with what they're proposing.
I would agree with that, Patrick, and I think they've done a really nice job outlining the 4 findings of fact as well.
Is
Their discussion?
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to not give anyone a chance to ask a question or anything before
I don't know. It's such a key piece of property, that entire strip, and UNCW's right there. They've all done such a good job to keep canopy trees along the line, and it's a shame that I guess we'll lose the crepe myrtles due to a sidewalk, but just then it's just not going to fit the character of that stretch of road in our. I know it's tight in there, and I know it's a peculiar property, so I see where they fit within the hardships. It's just, it's really unfortunate. It's not gonna have any trees up. And we see so many times where they create these images of what the landscape is proposed to look like. So I just hope that they would follow through with their proposal.
And unfortunately, the crepe myrtles are not on their property. They're within the right of way, so.
Yeah, and I think because of the way the utility, I would probably normally say no to it because I'd want the trees in there, but because of these utilities, you'd end up having trees probably die eventually.
I think it's
And
I think it's a short-term.
we have the ability of like increasing sort of the area and pushing as much as you can into an area. It's all going to be quantified by the numbers that are in this that's been submitted. So the city would have that as a background to say, you know, you said you're doing 403 and we see 200, it would weigh against that variance. So I think there's some protection there.
Anything further from the board? Any additional comments from staff? No, okay. Based on the 4 findings of fact, unnecessary hardship would result from strict application. I do think the proximity of the power lines is certainly there, and the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property, which they do. It's the shape of the property and the right-of-way taking, which of course did not result from actions taken by the applicant. And I do think the visuals that they gave us are certainly within the spirit of the ordinance, and I think it's going to improve the appearance of the property. So based on the 4 findings of fact, I would propose a motion to approve the variance as requested.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. Next item before the board is item number, item number 4, 1601 South College Road.
Good afternoon, members of the board. This request is for a variance to the separation requirement between outdoor advertising signs, more commonly referred to as billboards, and residential zoning districts. The subject property is located at 1601 South College Road. It's shown on your screen there in the the green hatching. And it is across Parkway Drive from Longleaf Park. On January 3rd, planning staff accepted an application for this variance request. The property is zoned regional business, and it's in an area that's classified by the city as a receiving zone for billboards. So
the city, whenever we rewrote the billboard ordinance, designated certain zoning districts and certain locations to be acceptable for relocating existing billboards to. This is one of those areas. The subject property has a commercial building, multi-tenant, and a parking area that will remain. Land Development Code Section 18393 states that there must be a minimum of 200 linear feet from any residentially zoned lot on the same side of the road and a relocated billboard. This property does not meet that separation requirement from either the park or the church that's located at 1625 South College Road. You can see on the map, the zoning map in yellow, the rear of 1625 has a little sliver of residential zoning on it, and the entirety of the park is zoned residential. The applicant did prepare a sealed survey. It's shown on the right. It's an updated survey that shows the distance of the proposed billboard to the residential zoning on the church site, as well as the residential zoning for the park. So the applicant is requesting a variance of 37 feet to allow the proposed billboard within 200 feet of a residential zoning district. And they are here to make a presentation as well. But I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have of city staff.
Any questions for staff?
Just one. So the area that this sign is in, it was determined to be a receiving zone.
Yes, whenever the idea was to remove billboards from gateways and to allow the reconstruction of billboards, because when the ordinance was rewritten, many of the billboards that we had within the city were the wood piling structures, and all billboards in the city are considered non-conforming uses. However, we did want to encourage them to update them to make them look more attractive, and what we're seeing more demand for is the monopoles. We didn't necessarily want to discourage the placement of monopoles as opposed to the multi-pole structures, so we allowed them to rebuild them in place as monopole, and since then the General Assembly has made it very clear that that's allowable under state law. But we've also tried to identify areas that are more appropriate for billboards. Some of that is taking into consideration residential districts and versus like higher intensity commercial districts, and certain corridors that seem more appropriate for billboards.
Okay.
And this is one of those areas.
It just happens to have, like, the distance of that receiving area is close to a residential. I guess something we'd look at in the future if we have other.
Well, frequently, the districts that were identified are like commercial services, regional business, and higher intensity commercial districts that aren't typically directly abutting residential, but in some instances it occurs, and that's why that separation requirement was put into place.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, me again. Amy Schaefer with Lee Case on behalf of the applicant, Gray Outdoor. Again, thank you, Catherine, for your presentation. This is a kind of unique site. As you can see, it is a designated receiving area. So this is a place that the city said these kinds of outdoor advertising signs are appropriate. The reason that we're here, as you can see, Parkway Drive kind of splits where we're proposing to put the property, and then the First Advent Church and Longleaf Park are on the other side of Parkway Drive. However, a tiny portion of the church property, which is zoned O&I, which would not be an issue, is zoned residential. We looked back through the records and couldn't figure out how or when or how that tiny sliver of that parcel was zoned residential. And Longleaf Park is also zoned residential. Longleaf Park has deed restrictions on it that it can only be used for a park, so there aren't going to be houses there in the future. And again, we do have a signed and sealed survey. Unfortunately, we are closer than 200 feet to residentially zoned lots. We believe the intent, and I think Ms. Thurston said, is to protect residential properties, but this is not a residential property. There are no houses, there's no light that's going to be an issue, there's no visual impacts to these properties. They just happen to be zoned residential, and they are on the other side of Parkway Drive, which is a public right-of-way. So cars and trucks and other vehicles are going through that parcel as well. And again, this is just a little bit of visuals so you can kind of see the area that we're talking about. Is it a high-traffic area, lots of lights and signs, mainly commercial all through this area. So again, the hardship is really created by the city's conflicting desires to not have billboards, but if you do have them, we want them in these receiving areas, and there are only so many receiving areas in the city. Mr. Vick's company, Gray Outdoor, has a sign within a gateway, and the city is trying to move those to these receiving areas, and so is he. So he's been looking for different properties that this would be suitable on. As you can see again, it's particular to this property due to the shape of the property, due to the zoning of the O&I church property, and it's just this little sliver in the back corner that's zoned residential, and then the park property. Again, the city wants us to move the gateway sign. We're trying to move the gateway signs, looking for locations, but there are lots of separation requirements. So it's not just from residential. You have to be separated from other signs. You have to be separated from other digital signs. And so there's a lot of different things that go into moving these. And again, we do feel that this request is compliant with the spirit and purpose of the ordinance. It's in a designated receiving area. It's not within 200 feet of residentially zoned lots that have homes on it or that can ever have homes on them. You know, that tiny sliver of the O&I would have to come through a rezoning to have a home on it because it's just too small to build on that portion. And a lot of the concern is, and we did work this out, we just kind of wanted to show, a lot of people are concerned about light pollution from these digital signs, but here's just a quick video to kind of show that there are actually less light from these than typical billboards because it's very directional. And so Mr. Vick and I are both here to answer any questions if you have particular questions about the request.
I have a question. One thing you stated was that there were separation requirements between billboards and existing signs, and I noticed that the current tenant sign is right behind where your billboard is proposed. Does that present an issue as far as visualization of the tenant sign? There was a, if you could back up on the PowerPoint, there was a shot with the tenant sign.
Sure. I think it's down one more. Let me see. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, and you see the tenant sign right there. So the billboard's going to be in this view on the far side.
Yes,
that.
sir. And I think if Mr. Vick can speak to that.
Hey. So we actually would be.
If you could state your name and address, please.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm Gray Vick, and I live at 144 King Arthur Drive in Wilmington. And so the sign would actually be on this side of the property. The pole would actually be situated behind that sign, so we'll kind of have some separation there, and the overall sign would be above above that sign as well, so we wouldn't impede the view of it in any way. And that would just be all under the requirements that the city allows for this type of sign, for a relocated sign.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
So the gateway sign that you're relocating, so that would go away and this would be the change off, so that would
Yes,
sign
sir.
off on that one?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And it's located actually on North College Road, right when you come into town on College Road is where the existing location of the sign is right now.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Anything else for the applicant? Okay, thank you. I'd like to open the evidentiary hearing. If anyone has additional evidence to present, please come forward.
Excuse me. My name is Anna Patsalos, and my opinion
Ma'am?
is that the...
Ma'am, can you speak into the mic, please?
Yes, my name is Anna Patsalos, and I don't believe a huge sign like that should be on that particular place because of the huge traffic and distraction of the traffic of different drivers. I also own the property, the residential property that Mr. Grace had, and I believe it's less than 200 feet from the residential. And actually, he approached me about a month and a half ago, and he asked for my approval if I can give him the okay to do that because it's short. And I said, no, I need to follow the city's rules. That's why I'm here today. I need to oppose, and I don't agree on that. There's a lot of residential houses on the Parkway Drive, and especially one person that has been there over 50 years, my neighbor. And I don't know what he said. I'm sorry, I didn't understand about the Mr. Fix sign. I own that property, and that is going to interfere with his sign also. I don't know what else, any other questions that you have for me?
Any questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Is there anyone else here to give additional evidence at this matter? Anything additional from staff?
Yes, I would like to point out that on the slide that showed the request, I believe that it said that they were requesting a variance of 37 feet, which would be if the residential were only on the park property. However, to accommodate that residential sliver on the church's lot, they would actually need a variance of 42 feet.
Thank you. I'll close the evidentiary hearing and open up for board discussion. I've closed the evidentiary hearing. I'll reopen the evidentiary hearing. Yes, ma'am. Come forward.
Mr. Gray also just
Wait.
I'm sorry. Mr. Gray also told me that he has a surveyor that he said that he makes the 200 feet from the residential. I wasn't prepared for that because he told me that it was less than 200, so I would love to have my surveyor do that.
Okay, well, his survey does show it's less than 200 feet.
It does show less than 200?
ma'am.
Because he just told me it was 200. Yes, ma'am.
I believe that the residentially zoned property in the upper right-hand corner is what she's talking about, and that is 200 feet from the residentially zoned property. So if the survey, if that were the only property that we were talking about, we would not need a variance. We would just submit the survey to the city. And you know, if there were conflicting surveys, that's a whole different issue. I believe that's the residentially zoned parcel she's
Okay,
talking
I see.
about.
Thank you.
Thank you, sorry.
Okay, thank you. I will now close the evidentiary hearing and open for board discussion. I know the city wants to remove the gateway billboards, which is a primary concern, but that is right on the corner at Parkway and College. And I just, you know, I've got a little bit of a reservation with its location.
Yeah, it doesn't meet any of the findings of fact. At the end of the day, it's too close. And I don't see hardship. I don't see, there's nothing peculiar about the property. It's too close to the residential. It's too close to the park.
Seems to me that this is a self-created hardship rather than one that's been created by the property.
And the variance request is actually a little bit larger than what was initially proposed, so. I mean, does an unnecessary hardship result from strict application? I don't think so. I mean, you know, the hardship results from conditions peculiar to the property, such as location, size, or topography, maybe, sort of, but that property just may not be a suitable location for the sign. The hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. You know, maybe the property is just not appropriate for the proposal. And the request is just consistent with the spirit and purpose and intent of the ordinance, and I'm just not sure that it is.
Yeah, I like the idea of getting the gateway, but the distance is substantial.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to deny the variance based that it does not meet the four findings of fact.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Variance request does not pass. Thank you. The next item before the board today is item 5, 1802 South 17th Street.
I have to recuse myself from this item.
Just so happens we have an alternate in the wings.
Yeah.
Board Member Hovis is recusing himself from the next item. Tyler, we're glad to have you.
Are we ready to proceed?
Carry on. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Today I bring before you 1802 South 17th Street. The subject property contains a commercial structure, roughly 11,670 square feet, that was built circa 1990 and is located in the office and institutional zoning district. On or about October 24th, 2022, the owner submitted a pre-technical review committee consultation application for the renovation alteration to the existing structure. On or about October 25th, 2022, the owner of the property submitted a commercial demolition permit application for the demolition of the interior of the commercial property. Next, on November 23rd, 2022, at the pre-TRC meeting, it was determined that the building's renovation and alteration would exceed more than 50% of the market value of the structure before the start of construction, making the renovation alteration a substantial improvement, and would require the structure to be brought into compliance with the current flood standards of the Land Development Code, Section 18-270, Flood Management Standards. On January 3rd, 2023, planning staff accepted an application for a variance to the city's 2-foot freeboard requirement for substantial improvement to a structure in a special flood hazard area pursuant of City Code Chapter 18, Land Development Code, Section 18270B. As you can see here from the picture, the lot is located within a special flood hazard area and the regulatory floodway as determined by FEMA and FEMA's flood insurance rate map, which were effective on August 28, 2018. The most southern portion of the lot is located in the regulatory floodway, and the remaining southern and western area of the property is located within the AE flood zone and shaded X region. It's important to note that the current structure is not located in the regulatory floodway. FEMA and City Code Section 18-693 defines substantial improvement as any repair, reconstruction, rehabilitation, addition, or other improvements to a structure, the cost which equals or exceeds 50% of the market value of the structure before the start of construction. The cost of the substantial improvement is determined by adding all cost of all repairs and reconstruction carried over in a 5-year period immediately preceding the proposed repairs and reconstruction to the cost of the proposed repairs and reconstruction. The current flood zone has a base flood elevation of 16.4. FEMA standards for development as a special flood hazard area requires that all new or substantially improved buildings be elevated at or above base flood elevation. In this case would be 16.4. The City of Wilmington has adopted a higher standard for floodplain development. Land Development Code Section 18.270B requires all new construction be elevated at least 2 feet above base flood elevation. Such additional elevation is known as freeboard. In AE flood zones, the elevation of the structure is measured from mean sea level to the top of the first finished floor. The required elevation of the structure is 18.4, so that's 16.4 base flood elevation plus the 2-foot freeboard that the city has. Pursuant to the topographical survey prepared by Kenneth W. Knott of ESP Associates Incorporated on August 19, 2022, the existing structure has a finished floor elevation of 18 feet. With that, the applicant has requested a variance of 0.4 feet from the city's 2-foot freeboard standards for the addition and alteration of the structure. This matter is set before hearing on the Board of Adjustment today, February the 16th, 2023. This case is subject to the 4 findings of fact, and I ask that this presentation and all materials be submitted into the record.
Thank you.
And I'm here to answer any questions, and the applicant and agent are present also.
I have a question. It says that the current structure is not located within the regulatory floodway, and the footprint is not going to be expanded. Is that right?
That is correct. The property has 3 different flood zones essentially. It has the floodway, it has the AE zone, and the shaded X. In this case, the alterations that are going to be proposed are in the AE zone. We noted in the staff report the floodway because it is on the property, but it's very important to note that this structure is not proposing to go into the floodway. If they were, they would have to conduct what's called a no-rise analysis. It would be very costly on those points. So we noted it in the staff report, but I wanted to make sure that we noted that it has no bearing on this variance because the structure is not located in that floodway.
Right. Now, FEMA will grant a letter of map amendment with an elevation certificate and a survey showing the structures outside the flood zone. Is there a reason this property is not eligible for a letter of map amendment?
So the structure is located in the AE flood zone.
Okay.
And any additional construction that's done to that, again, that's when we hit that 50% threshold.
Right.
Once they hit that 50%, they have to then bring the building into compliance with our current standards.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon again. Final one, I promise. Amy Schaefer with Lee Case. I'm here on behalf of the applicant and property owner, Beacon Education. I'm also here with Zach Messick from Monteith, who is the builder. Again, this is I had some technical difficulties, so we're passing out a site plan. It didn't show up very well on my presentation. I would like to be very clear, this is an adaptive reuse of a current building. As Mr. Moore said, we are not expanding the building footprint at all. And in fact, and Zach and Todd can speak to this a little better, when we first came in, we were under the 50% threshold. But due to the improvements to the property and the project, as well as the increase of cost of materials, during the planning process, we were kicked over the 50% threshold. We've had multiple appraisals, and there's some back and forth of whether we are or not. And so we just decided to go ahead and bring forward the variance request instead of having those kinds of conversations, because again, we are not increasing the footprint of the building. So again, this is the old Women's Health building in between 16th and 17th Street. It's been vacant for a while. It was used as a COVID site for some time for testing, and so just to kind of orient you as to where we are. This is our proposed project, and I do not know that I can do justice to Spark Academy, but basically this is a part of Beacon Education, which is also affiliated with GLOW, and it's going to be an early childhood education center that services the underserved community for this need. It's very important to this location and very important to the city that we have this kind of program. So add that to the specific location here, which is close to the Housing Authority, which is close to the hospital, which is close to a lot of the residents that it would serve, and also an adaptive reuse of a building. So we're not taking up green space for this project. And again, I apologize for the site plan, so that's kind of why we wanted to give it to you in a hard copy. The renovations are inside the building. There's also going to be extensive landscaping, play areas, you know, the things that you would anticipate a daycare or an early childhood education center needing. So all of these increase the cost of our construction. In addition, I think there's going to be a commercial kitchen, but again, I'll let the experts speak to all of that. So again, we are completely compliant with FEMA standards. The variance that we're requesting is only a 0.4-foot variance from the city's 4-foot, the city's freeboard requirement. And so with that, I will ask Mr. Messick if he can come up and introduce himself and walk you through any of the project plans that you might have some specific questions about.
Thank you.
If you could just state your name and occupation and qualifications.
Good afternoon, everyone. Zachary Messick with Monteith Construction. Work in the pre-construction department. Here on behalf of Todd Godby, Glow Academy, Spark Academy. So just to start off, this is largely just an architectural upfit to the interior of the building. Oh,
I don't know if you wanted the site plan.
sure, yeah. Feel free to interrupt me with any questions you may have. So basically what we're doing is an interior outfit. The cost of drywall's gone up. The cost of glazing in the last year since summer's up about 40%. Across the market, we're just seeing general escalation. That's kind of the pinch point that's brought us here today. The appraisal, as been mentioned, we've had a little bit of ebb and flow on that assessment. But overall, this is a dire need for our area. I think everyone can understand that. The location is absolutely perfect in relation to people that may not be, well, how can I say this? Bus traffic and things of that nature, everyone in that surrounding hospital area. The upfit is largely going to be drywall, flooring, new ceilings to be replaced, things of that nature. One of the big cost drivers is definitely the commercial kitchen to serve the kids ages 0 to 5. So those are the primary pinch points driving the cost.
And then just to quickly walk through the requirements for a floodplain variance, do you mind just going through and addressing each of those just briefly? I think we talked about that. That again, I don't think there's any danger of materials being swept into other lands. There's already a building there. And it's my understanding that through research, there's been no history of flooding or claims.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. We've actually, to do some preliminary research as we were trying to develop the design of the building, we did some architectural interior demo, pulled some walls open just to assess it, and I can confirm there's been no flood impact since the building's been built. Beyond that, I mean, it's largely a no to all these questions. I guess the crux of the matter is the Wilmington OBGYN never experienced any issues, and we're basically here to not change the elevation of the building. Having to do that would virtually be a non-starter for the project and a market impact to the community in general. We would have to level the building, which in turn would just cancel the project.
So again, I think we've clearly covered the importance of the services that the proposed facility would have. It's not applicable, we're not a waterfront location. Alternative locations, I think we discussed why those probably wouldn't be the best situation for this. And again, we don't think we are subject to flood damage. There's no history on the property that we could find. The compatibility of the proposed use with the existing development, it is entirely compatible and essentially needed in that area. The comprehensive plan and again, the floodplain management program, I think this complies with all of those requirements. There's no concerns about safety or access to the property. It's accessed through 16th and 17th Street, close to the hospital, which is one of the safest places to be. And again, we really aren't changing anything to the site except internal to the building and some landscaping improvements.
Just overall, a general upfit to have classrooms, a small meeting space for community events, continuing education for families. So, please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to open up the evidentiary hearing if anyone has additional evidence to present in this matter. Any additional comments from staff? Close the evidentiary hearing and open it for comments from the board.
Seems like this easily meets the findings of fact.
Well, I agree, and we've had this come before us on existing structures before that met FEMA requirements but did not meet the additional freeboard requirements, and .4 variance certainly seems, in my mind, to be negligible, and I do think they've met the findings for a flood variance.
There would absolutely be hardship. They wouldn't be able to do the project, and it falls in line with the spirit of the code, so. I'm prepared to make a motion, Chairman, if you're.
Please.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance that it falls in line with the 4 findings of fact.
This is going to be with the factors of the floodplain.
Correct.
I agree. We have a motion to approve the variance as requested. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We do have other business today, election of the chair and vice chair. You coming back to defend yourself?
Catherine, do they all need to stay up there for this?
No, only 5
Just
can
the 5?
vote.
Okay.
Chairman Moore, I can't believe that your term is up, but today we do need to select another chair, and with Mark Saulnier resigning from the board, we will also need to elect a vice chair. And I would obviously nominate someone, but I can't. One of you will have to.
Do we have any nominations from the board for chairman first? Can I do it again?
You could serve as vice chair, but
Okay.
a different chair will have to be selected.
Good. Do we have a nomination for chair?
Who's been on it next longest?
Jeff Hovis has been on the next longest if you count all of his terms.
Well, that's not fair.
It was a fair question.
I'd like to make a motion that nominate Jeff Hovis as chair for the Board of Adjustment.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And now we have a vice chair. Any nominations from the board?
I'll nominate Patrick for vice chair.
We have a nomination. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain. Jeff, you're in command.
Great.
Thank you. If there's no further business before the Board of Adjustment, we stand adjourned.
One last,
Yep, there is one last thing.
Sorry. Graham's going to be serving full-time, correct?
He has not been appointed as a full member. That's something that the city council will need to do.
Okay. Do we need to do anything for that?
Not at this time.
Okay.
We need to put
won't
up some
need to do
signs,
anything.
along the highways that you want to.
We will just be heavily relying on our alternates until we have another full board member.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further business before the Board of Adjustment, we stand adjourned.
All right.
Thank you.